Hello, my name is James Downey, and I'm a nutritionist with CP Feeds. I'm here today with Paul Cornette from Cornette Dairy, and we're going to talk to you about the feeding side of things in a robot system. We'll let Paul introduce himself and the dairy a little bit first.
Yeah, I'm Paul Cornette, one of the two owners here at Cornette Dairy. We're milking 360 cows, about 101 pounds a day right now. We've been using the robotic system that you can see behind me for about 4 years now, just about a week over that. And we also run about 1,000 acres of land growing most of our own grain and all our own forages.
Paul is the feeder on this dairy, and there's a lot of talk about folks going to robot systems. There's a number of different brands of robots in the country, and some luck with all of them. Here they're using the Lely system, and we're going to talk to Paul a little bit about how he manages the feeding side of things. Especially in a free-flow system such as the Lely robots, we really need to manage the feed consistently, just like on any dairy, regardless of the milking system. And we also need to watch the amount of energy in the bunk versus what they're going to get in the robot system. So Paul, in this dairy, how do you manage feed changes, and especially dry matter changes, and kind of monitor that as you're feeding cows on a daily basis?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is to ensile it with consistency in mind. We use, if you're using piles or bunkers, that is, fill bottom to top, more so than say back to front. That gives you a more consistent product coming out. Other than that, you just need to be mindful on an outside pile of, are we in a real dry weather pattern? Are we in a damp, cool weather pattern? When that persists for several days, it actually will affect the dry matter, and you kind of have to have a feel, I guess, for how many bucketfuls to dump in the mixer, things like that. When you go into a robot system, everybody tells you to be very mindful of what you're dumping in the bunk to make sure that you're not overgraining anybody, not putting too much energy in that bunk, because it can and will drive down the cow's visit behavior. If they're getting all their energy through the mixer, through the PMR, they're a little bit less inclined to go to that robot and visit as many times as you want, especially late lactation cows, we discovered.
And as Paul mentioned, it's very critical to be watching so we don't have too much energy in the bunk and not enough at the robot. Let's talk a little bit about fiber in the PMR and how you call bunks, make your feeding decisions, and feed for the number of cows. We really need to watch that we don't have too much fiber filling these grills up in the PMR, that they just don't feel like going to the robot and wanting those goodies in there.
Yeah, James, I guess a lot of that boils down to being on top of your forage quantities and qualities, having some choices to work with when you're making that PMR. We've kind of run into it both ways over the 4 years, where sometimes we've got too much fiber in, say, a first crop, or some corn maybe we didn't want to chop but had to. And right now, as a matter of fact, we're dealing with some really high quality third and fourth crop from last fall, where we've run into issues where we've come close to, or at least had concerns about whether or not we were going to have an adequate fiber mat in the rumen. So having a variety of sources, or at least an adequate supply to overcome those challenges, is important. We've also discovered at times that some of the more common forage replacements, we kind of overfed corn gluten feed pellets at one point in time, and that drove some of those late lactation cows away. So if anything, there's an even stronger emphasis on putting up adequate supply of quality forages in this system.
Now in this dairy, we have a few different pens and rations. I'll let Paul kind of explain how we group cows here, and then how we feed those a little differently as well to maximize the visits, but also maximize rumen, mat, and cow health as well.
So we do group our cows a little bit differently. I think not a lot of robot herds have a fresh cow pen, but we have a pen for about 35-ish animals. We really don't necessarily have a high group. The one behind us kind of turns out that way. They're kind of the good attitude robot cows, the consistent visitors. But otherwise, in our old barn we have 2 groups for first lactation animals that if we choose to, we can feed them a little bit differently. Right now we're just figuring for a little bit different intake, but at times we have pushed higher protein to kind of help them in that first lactation, put some size on, and reach their peak a little bit faster.
So a lot of these things we're talking about today are important in any system, whether you're milking cows in robots or in parlors or in tie stall barns. But I think Paul made some good emphasis on the things we really need to monitor. Those feed changes are absolutely crucial to watch. Dry matter change to make sure that we have the cows getting enough from the PMR, but also still wanting to go to a robot. And that's really critical even in a guided flow system. We do get a lot of questions in a robot system as far as using a pellet or a grain mix, and there's a lot of different discussions. A lot of that will come down to what you have on your farm as far as resources or corn in storage, beans in storage, and where you want to be for production as well, and your robot system. So I think that's a question you can have with a CP Feeds nutritionist on farm, and maybe use some experience from some other folks that have been in both systems in the past as well. And last thing, we do get some questions on the flavorings. We do use a few different flavorings in the grain mix at time, or certainly in the pellets. And again, that's kind of a farm's decision as well. So if you have any other questions, please reach out. We like to have some experience with our other robot herds, and we're happy to help here at CP Feeds. Thanks for listening.